So we begin by introducing our subject. What do we mean when we say cognitive science? What is this cognition that it's studying? The core sense of cognition has something to do with knowing, as I'm sure you're aware. And we can follow the word back, but terms with which we discuss knowing change over time. And so studying simply word histories is not going to be a great deal of help to us here. When we're asking questions about knowing, we're asking about what knowledge is, about who the knower is and what form they need to have, and what kind of things can be known. So we always have a relationship between the knower and the known, which will often come out as the subject and the world. But both of those terms are, for now, somewhat uncertain. And the nature of the relationship is what we'll be investigating. That the relationship between the knower and the known should be a topic of discussion. Shouldn't be a surprise. This has recurred throughout human history in many, many contexts, in religious contexts and in philosophical contexts. As far back as we have written records, people have been inquiring into this. Inquiry into our own nature is, in some sense, our oldest inquiry. So while we will be using the scientific vocabulary and the best scientific means at our disposal to ask questions here, there will be limits to what we can do because we're entering into territory that science itself is not completely comfortable with. When we, in a contemporary context, talk about minds and brains and behavior, those are the terms in which the themes of cognitive science are conventionally discussed now. We're getting involved in conversations that are much older, in which some of those terms would have appeared with different words. Words like spirit, or consciousness, or intellect, or soul. And there are many other terms we could take. And the point is that they're always contested. These don't simply pick out single things. So talking about the mind is going to be challenging. Talking about behavior, which is another core concern, if we're trying to understand ourselves, we're also asking, why do we do what we do? Talking about behavior turns out to also be difficult. And talking about brains, I hope, is clearly going to be complicated. So, let's start with the simplest of those three. Brains are, in some sense, simpler than either minds or behavior. For this reason, we know what a brain is. We know where a brain is. We can find a brain. We can take them out, slice them up, look at the things. They are enormously complex. And despite many advances and insights that we've gained, the brain remains a huge, huge mystery. But we do know where to find them. So that's, of the triad, going to be the easiest one. Behavior might seem to be very, very simple. You just describe what someone is doing. But if you think about it, your description of what someone is doing is not the same thing as what they're doing. It's your opinion, your view of what they're doing. So there's always more than one way to describe someone. The cartoons here on the slide show what you might think of as behaviors: talking on the phone, rummaging through your pockets, the dog's taking a poo, someone sorting the laundry, someone else is playing the banjo. But unfortunately, our actions, our movement through the world, doesn't come with labels. And if we observe someone at any specific time, we might ask, what is this person doing? And there's more than one way to describe it. So supposing we come upon Christopher Robin here, who's, let's just say, murdered his grandmother with an axe and is now digging a hole to bury the corpse. We observe Christopher Robin and we might describe his behavior in different ways. We might say that he's digging and we wouldn't be wrong. We might say that he's burying a body and we wouldn't be wrong. We might also say that he's digesting his lunch and we wouldn't be wrong. And we might say that he's worrying about being caught and we wouldn't be wrong. There's no single way to characterize behavior. So behaviors are not like rocks lying around in the natural world to be found. Anytime we use the category of behavior, we're using a term that implicates us in the way in which we describe things. Now, most behavioral terms assume that behavior is purposive, that it's for something, that there's a goal in something that you're trying to achieve. Goals are difficult for science, and indeed, one of the characteristics of the modern hard sciences is the refusal to allow goals or purposes into their scientific picture. But that may work in physics and in chemistry, but it stops working in biology, and it doesn't work at all when we come to the human and social sciences, where we can't begin to describe what's going on without acknowledging that there are underlying hidden purposes and dealing with the complications that arise. So behavior is going to be a difficult one. But mind, of course, is the big problem. And I hope you're not coming to this module to learn how your mind works. We have no clue how your mind works. We don't know what a mind is. There is no agreed definition of a mind. In our everyday conversation, we discuss ourselves, helping ourselves to terms that are simply not built from scientific pieces. So it's quite okay to say, I have a mind, I changed my mind. I will treat you as a person with a mind, you will treat me as a person with a mind. But that does not mean that we know what a mind is, or that a mind is anything at all other than a way of talking about ourselves. So this sets up a challenge for us in cognitive science. When we're talking about minds, our everyday language, which is fine in an everyday context, may mislead us. The word mind is used in an impossible variety of ways. Here's a few of them. Put your mind at ease. I'm seeing something in my mind's eye. You're out of your mind. Make up your mind. You've got a one-track mind. You're absent-minded. A mind like a steel trap. These are all everyday senses, and they work perfectly well in everyday context. But that does not guarantee that underlying our everyday use of language, there is a thing called a mind. If we take something which is spectacularly poorly defined and we insist or treat it as if it were simply a thing, we're doing something that we can notice. We're reifying. Reification, it comes from the Latin res, which means a thing, is taking an abstract and vaguely defined term and treating it as if it was a simple thing. And this is a problem in cognitive science. Basically, if you want to elaborate and develop better stories about who we are and how we function, you're going to lean on some assumptions. Usually those assumptions get forgotten and people start reifying as if they knew that there was a mind to be described. So it's unfortunate and it's going to present challenges to us. But on the other hand, we have to realize that there's a great appetite out there. People really, really want to know who they are and how they work. And even if scientists say there's limits to the kinds of questions I can answer, people will still demand stories, and there will be no shortage of people providing those stories. So there's going to be claims and counterclaims and theories everywhere. But we will acknowledge at the start of this course that the word mind is not defined and will not be defined by the end of this course either. We'll have seen many ways of approaching the topics that come up when we're talking mind talk. So just to throw in one more language problem before we set off, and I'm going to reserve this one for class discussion, but the terms objective and subjective need to be considered together. They're often contrasted with each other. You might say science provides us with objective facts. Subjective stuff is a matter of opinion. We'll make it clear in class that this distinction is anything but a simple distinction. And because cognitive science is interested in subjects, in people who know, in the knower, then we cannot rely on a simple distinction between objective and subjective. That'll be a fun one to discuss in class.